So Rapelang, thank you so much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we go into leadership, can you tell us a little bit about your journey? Where did you grow up?
Sure, lovely to be with you on this platform, Nick. So I was born in Gaborone in Botswana. So I spent the first sort of 10, 11 years of my life there. Went to Thornhill Primary School, and I completed my primary school education and high school at Rodin in Johannesburg. So I was a boarder there. And then I went to UCT, where I did a business science, computer science degree. So spent my life basically in about three cities, Gaborone, Joburg, and Cape Town.
And can you tell us what was your dream career when you grew up?
Sure, my dream career when I grew up, I think I changed quite a lot. I'm sure there was a time when I wanted to be a ballet dancer, and sometime when I thought sort of law might have been interesting, or even medicine was interesting. But by the time I sort of finished out of high school, I was pretty clear that I just didn't know it all. And I would have liked to sort of take a break out and take a gap year and think about it. But gap years are not very popular in black families. So my parents insisted I go to university immediately. And my older brother was at university at the time, at UCT already. And I asked him to sort of come up with a suggestion as what I could study. I said I definitely want to do accounting or actuarial science, so come up with something sort of interesting. And he suggested a business science, computer science degree, largely as a joke, really. And it was because I'd never done programming and things. And while we had computer sessions in school, there was definitely no programming as such. So it was quite a big shock when I got there and initially try to change and look at other things in the commerce faculty, your accountings and your marketing and your organizational psychology, and they've got lots of things there. And in the end, I decided to stick with computer science because it seemed to be the only subject that allowed you to create stuff. With most of the other subjects, it felt like I would be doing reports and analyzing and reviewing and auditing for many, many years after university. And with computer science, it actually allowed you to apply your imagination and to inject something into reality that didn't exist before.
So is it fair to say that you are a creator by heart?
I believe so. I believe in building. I believe we need to be able to do things that have a net contribution to society. And to me, creation is the beginning of that. Everything else, yes, has place and value, but the biggest impact is going to be from new things that are injected into the world.
And can you tell us who or what were your sources of inspiration at that time?
You know, I think my parents have been my primary source of inspiration my whole life. I mean, my parents grew up quite poor, and they were the first in their respective families to get a university degree, and as an architect and electrical engineer, so they've excelled professionally and always done businesses and worked on projects and tried to make their lives better. So I've learned a great deal from them, and that is really around hard work, discipline, the ability or the importance of believing in your ability to contribute and to excel, and how that is sort of the basis of all value creation. So I would say that I've always looked up to my parents, and I haven't had much in terms of external idols until much later on in my life. So I can't say that was a primary driving factor. I mean, people I look up to now, I think Oprah Winfrey has done a remarkable thing in her career. Elon Musk has been amazing in the 3 businesses that he runs, quite astonishing. And for me, people like Thabo Mbeki were excellent leaders who also managed to put together a country after such massive changes, and all the work he did sort of behind the scenes there. I guess maybe I favor the doers sort of in the background who kind of make things happen there. So, and many of these sort of other African leaders before, Kwame Nkrumah for me is also a standout leader there, Julius Nyerere, and so many sort of more that I've liked to have met, but, born past that time. And Sir Seretse, for example, one from Botswana, is an extraordinary leader as well. So
Rapelang, where did you start your career?
My career basically started straight after university. Coming out of high school, I had already felt the sense that I was tired of working the system. And by the end of university, I was very clear in my mind that I actually couldn't sustain working the system, and I felt like I was living by default, plodding along from one process to the next, one system to the next, without ever making any intentional choices. And by the time I was 22 there, I was pretty clear that this is the end of the road on this kind of living for me. And all I really knew at that point in time is that I wanted to be able to have a bigger say in how I spent my time and what I gave my attention to. And through a process of elimination, that seemed like entrepreneurship. And a couple of other guys in my computer science class were also quite desperate not to get a job. So we started talking and brainstorming what could we do, so our parents don't kill us and we don't end up doing nothing sort of next year. And how do we come up with a plan? And we said, well, let's start a business. And then it's like, okay, what are we going to do? And basically, as students, we had always struggled with the high cost of telecommunications. It was much higher from calling prepaid calls back in 2006 than it is now, or rather 2005. So we imagined that given Bluetooth and Wi-Fi becoming more prevalent on cell phones, one really should be able to experience things like Skype on mobile phones. And that's really started our journey with Yego, where we built some of the earliest mobile web apps. So what we now experience as WhatsApp and Viber calls, but this was way back in the day. And that's what launched our career, because it was quite cutting edge at the time. Only a couple of other companies around the world were doing that. And we managed to do that with quite limited resources, sitting in a little apartment in Cape Town.
So what happened to that company? Did you sell it?
Sure. So Yego, we managed to get our first angel investment towards the end of our first year, where we had a demo and a pilot sort of the platform now, an actual voice call sort of running. And that's enabled us to launch Yego.com early in 2007. And as we tried to make the consumer market work, we realized we were sort of quite early there, because people were not used to buying the equivalent of Skype credit on a cell phone. And this was before app stores. So it's not like people had loaded credit card details on the iPhone and Android store. So the consumer market proved to be unsustainable. And given that we didn't get the kind of funding our British and Israeli counterparts had, we needed to find a different way to be able to monetize the platform. And we started looking more at a business and SME environment where it's easier to bill and collect. And also at the time, we needed to better control the quality of calls. So inside an office environment was also a lot easier to do. So we were trying to look at that, also find more investment. And that's where we met up with Telfree. They were a VoIP operator, the VoIP operator that started around the same time we did. And basically built a whole lot of telecoms infrastructure and needed a lot of the solutions and software and expertise that we had built on a software basis for them to be able to create products that could reside on this new network they had built. So then Telfree bought a majority stake in Yego in the end of 2009. And we stayed on for another sort of 4 years there, building up that company. So it was really great, because now they had the SME network and the agent network to help us sell into businesses, and we could do all this R&D for the captive sort of audience that they had there, and that helped us basically then to make the business work. And after 7-8 years, we realized that we were always sort of software people more than telecoms people, and now we're getting more and more into telecoms, which really wasn't what we had sort of set out to do. And that's when we decided actually we ready to sort of start our next thing again. And I'm working on Rekindle Learning, and my other colleagues started some other businesses as well.
So tell us, how did you come up with the idea for Rekindle Learning?
Sure. I've always been interested in learning and how we can apply technology to the learning environment, and we just didn't have time before at Yego, but it's something I thought about a great deal. And with any business, I sort of always reflect on my own experiences. And for me, I remember in particular in high school that even though I went to a very good school and we would, get tested and things, and we'd get these test scripts back, I always remember thinking how futile and what a waste of time it was that I don't come back and revise the stuff that I got wrong. And it's even the stuff that I might have gotten right, but I was just very lucky to get right. And over time, with all the subjects and over the years, you just never get to track that kind of thing where you can focus on your weak areas. So for me, I believe that technology could sort of simplify a lot of the learning process, where instead of learning in a linear way, which is kind of how most of us would study from chapter 1 to the end, one could use learning apps that can actually track the stuff that you're getting wrong and right and help you focus on those weaker areas until you close that gap. Whereas most of the time, especially as a student, you prefer to focus on the things that you're already good at, and which isn't sort of an effective studying approach. So that sort of was the inspiration behind our micro-learning mobile and web app that we have at Rekindle Learning. Basically, that provides learning steps in these small bite-sized chunks or nuggets as such, and a lot of it is question-based, and the idea is that it tracks the stuff you're getting wrong and right and helps you to focus on that. So it can be used in any context really. So we've worked with a lot of corporations, companies around compliance training, product and sales kind of stuff. And typically companies would have given their employees those 300-page manuals and maybe a 2-day workshop, and it's all super intense for that period, and then kind of everyone forgets. And now companies are starting to see the wastage sort of in that cognitive overload and overwhelming people in that way. And basically with the micro-learning approach, it's about more small sustained learning interactions of 5-15 minutes twice or 3 times a week over a longer period of time to retain that knowledge and actually be able to track on an individual basis what people know and don't know and what they've struggled with. So I believe that as training and learning becomes more efficient, that's one of the things that will become quite important, this approach of micro-learning and personalized learning. We're also doing a tool for sort of English for university students, specifically focused on improving the sort of English literacy. Certainly for me, I've always felt that my ability to communicate has given me a huge leg up in life. And certainly when I hire young people, that communication ability becomes quite clear how much it holds them back in their career. So when the opportunity came up to buy a platform called English Word Power last year, I took that up and revamped it quite significantly. And the idea is that it's used as a first-year program or a pre-degree program at university, where over the course of 6 months or a year, as part of a communications course in that program, they can cover a lot of the language fundamentals that they may not have been adequately exposed to during high school. So all your grammar and language rules and reading and comprehension approaches, critical thinking, so that learners are better positioned to be able to consume tertiary content, which is a huge determinant in whether they will successfully complete that degree or not. So that's where we're playing around now, and it's really, for me, I believe that if Africa is ever going to take that sort of place as a global leader, we need to address education and skills, and we need to do it more efficiently and faster than it's ever done before, and technology will be a big part of that. So Rekindle Learning is me trying to explore how and where that could work.
Now, Rapelang, your thought leadership has been featured on Forbes at the World Economic Forum. You shared the stage with the likes of President Kagame.
Yeah.
Can you tell us where exactly are you now, and maybe what's the next chapter for Rapelang?
Sure. So I'm still very busy with Rekindle Learning, growing our team, looking at new products that can also add to our stable. And at the beginning of this year or end of last year, I joined Nisela Capital as a partner there. Over the 12 years as an entrepreneur, my frustration has really been that early stage venture capital has not significantly improved access, and the options are still quite constrained. So I just thought, I could keep complaining for another 12 years or try to understand what it looks like on the other side of the table. So Nisela Capital primarily does a lot more private equity advisory and investments. And I'm hoping by understanding sort of transactions on that scale, I can be a bit better positioned to understand how I would structure early stage sort of venture capital initiatives. So that's the other thing I've added onto my plate, and maybe in some time, a year or two, I might be able to have a different proposition around early stage tech funding there once I've gotten enough insight. And
looking back at your career, would you say there was a turning point in your career?
A turning point in my career? I'm not sure. So, I think for me, the biggest turning point was when I decided, actually, I can't do the corporate role where I can't have enough say about how I spent my time, and I need a different way to do life. That was a very, very big sort of turning point. I think the next turning point as Diego sort of emerged was really the realization that, I knew I was never the greatest coder, so I didn't want to necessarily keep coding, and the business has so many other components to it. So in the end, I can be quite a good generalist, and I learned a whole lot of parts of running the business, operations, the accounting, the marketing, the investor relations. And I think that experience then defined my ongoing sort of generalist roles, that I can multitask and tackle quite a lot of things, and haven't really ever specialized in one particular thing. I think that has stood me sort of in good stead now, and I'm quite comfortable with that because I think I could get quite bored in a very sort of narrow specialization. So that definitely defined my skill set now, and especially the fact that I could sit between developers and salespeople and bridge that communication gap and bridge that gap, which is can be quite big, because developers and commercial people often think quite differently. So that's sort of what then has carved my skill set and things. And I would say possibly being forced to sort of engage with all the external stakeholders and all the businesses I've built has built up communication skills, and that has made it easier to be part of networks like the World Economic Forum and do speaking engagements and interviews. So it kind of just emerged over time, but it's been a significant sort of defining point of my brand and role now. And yeah, it merged through the work process.
And what would you say is driving Rapelang today?
I think I'm still pretty much driven by the very things that drove me 12 years ago. I just want to build cool stuff and feel that I'm working on something that moves the needle of society forward. And if by some small measure I've done that in my lifetime, then I feel like it was worthwhile. I knew I would be overwhelmed or frustrated if I just had to keep doing something for the sake of money or social pressure or whatever else. As I think in my mind, my brain would short circuit and I wouldn't be able to continue that indefinitely. And I would perhaps rather be a bum unless I know that we are pushing a needle forward. Otherwise, I struggle to understand the why.
Now, let's talk about leadership. What does the future of leadership mean to you?
The future of leadership and what it means for me. I think society has progressed quite a lot from the traditional leadership style of being sort of more domineering and dictatorial, and because the reality is that no one person has all the solutions, and no one person can save other people. So I'm glad those kind of notions are behind us, and we're seeing what is going to be essential for the future of leadership is a more collaborative, humble and open-minded sort of leadership style that recognizes that given all the changes that are happening in our world, the huge amount of information, the diversity of people, that the most important thing I think a leader can do is facilitate the environment for the best minds to apply the best solutions at any given point in time. And I think I'm a facilitator in primarily in my leadership style. I've never felt that I know the answers, but perhaps if we created the right environment for people, then they can emerge and people can actually execute on that. And yeah, there's definitely the other angle on leadership is this need for ongoing improvement and continuous change. My favorite quote is, I think it goes by, I subscribe, my leadership principle basically is this, that I commit to doing, or my definition of leadership is I am committed to the best we now know and simultaneously committed to anything that improves the best we now know. So it's almost a contradictory, well, not contradictory, but dynamic sort of definition of leadership that affirms that you can't be sort of stuck in your ways. You can simply do the best with what you know today, but you have to keep the door open for improving the best that you know.
And what have you learned from your own journey that you consider really important for building future leaders?
I think the most important sort of skill I have learned in my time really is the ability to sort of keep going. So I think intelligence and all of these other things are useful, what have you, but I think big part of the reason why I am here is really the capacity to keep going. And I have learned through the toughest sort of positions in business that time pushes past everything and nothing is actually here to stay. No amount of pain or sadness or disappointment can hold time. Time pushes past it all, and simultaneously time pushes past all successes and jubilation and joy, and is really much more. And it taught me that there's no defining moment of failure or success, because tomorrow you try again and you do something else. And that capacity to just appreciate that it's a journey, that you keep going, and the most important thing is to outlast is, I think, a crucial ability that has helped me.
And when you speak to aspiring leaders, what do you tell them they should focus on for future-proofing their career, if that is possible?
For future-proofing your career, I don't know that it's possible to entirely future-proof your career. Between other people and outsourcing and technology, things will change. What I think is the most important thing is that you learn how to relearn, and you learn how to open feedback loops in your life to allow you to adjust and change. So in fact, for me, the most important trait when I look at working with people or hiring someone isn't necessarily that base level of competence or intelligence right now. It's much more useful for me to know that in a situation after they have been fed new information or they've learned, do they take the time to reflect? Do they interrogate what they've learned? Do they interrogate their reaction to the situation? Do they interrogate how to improve? Because the shorter your feedback loops are, the faster you can respond to changes in your environment and the faster you can adapt. And so it's people that have very short feedback loops that are going to be able to cope as the future changes. And the ones who block out feedback and don't raise that level of awareness or acknowledge what's happening around them are the ones that are going to struggle the most.
Now, when it comes to technology, which are the technologies or the tools of technology that you would recommend future leaders should study, should learn, should master?
I don't know if there's a particular type of technology that is applicable for all leaders to apply. I think it really is going to be sector driven. A couple that might be pervasive are I think the way companies will be working going forward will necessitate more collaborative working environments. And there's a lot more collaborative online tools that companies don't use. I think startups and tech companies have been very good at it, but corporations have kind of slacked and got quite slow on that and are still sort of too reliant on shared drives and emails and things. And the future working environment needs to be much, much more highly collaborative. Are there online sort of easy task management systems, online chat, office chat sort of environments? Is everything else done online, from your payroll to your accounting? And all of these things are going to determine how quickly people can access information in your business, how quickly they can engage other people meaningfully, how quickly they can respond to things. So the collaborative work environment and the tools that you use, I think, are going to be a big defining point for how you operate businesses going forward. In terms of where businesses might need to shift their business models or create new products and services, I think we all need to be watching artificial intelligence to a large extent, and be willing to experiment with the possibilities with that. And if you don't do that, other people are going to do it for you and cannibalize you directly. So it's going to be important, specifically in financial services and insurance industries, but also medicine and even education, that we understand how to get the benefits out of it in the short term, and where we're going to need to shift people's skills and abilities away from tasks that artificial intelligence might take up. And for me, it's not doom and gloom. I think it just requires an open-mindedness and proactiveness to decide to leverage it.
Now, Rapelang, when you speak to future leaders, which social media platforms do you advise them to use for building their personal brand and maybe promoting their message?
I don't know that everyone needs to build a social media brand. I think everyone should have a brand, but I think it's important to stay true to who you are as well. So it takes a lot of work to actually maintain a social media presence. And in my mind, it also depends on your style. If you do often have short sort of quirky comments to make, then maybe Twitter's your thing. I personally don't have a lot of short quirky comments to make, but I can share my sort of speaking and interviews and the like, and that's what I'll end up doing on Twitter. And I think I haven't really done much of the others other than sort of my Facebook page, so I probably am definitely weaker on advising people on sort of social media. But I think that everyone needs to decide on what medium or platform they're going to use. If it's going to remain a blog, then so be it. If it's going to be if you're going to add Twitter and Facebook onto it, then whatever you do, it needs to sort of be done consistently and resonate with you. Is how I see it. But you should ask the social media experts on what's trending now.
Now, Rapelang, you are influencing millions of young people. Can you maybe share a success story where you mentored somebody and that somebody took your advice to heart?
I remember one particular story of a gentleman I met many, many years ago, and I don't remember this initial meeting, but I believe he had proposed an idea, and I had suggested that he forget that and go back to completing his degree. And I suppose, and I don't remember the conversation, but my basis of that would have been that expertise is going to be building expertise in a particular area is critical to be able to stand out in the working world today. And he came back to me a few years later to say that he has completed his degree and he has now started this business, and I was quite blown away that it had had such an impact and had compelled him to actually go back and finish his degree and build greater expertise. So I think that's, for me, one of my favorite stories, sort of in that respect. I think I've heard a lot of people who have heard the Jaeger story and been inspired to look at their own ventures as well, which is always lovely to hear. Yeah.
And tell us, are there any role models of leadership that you would suggest future leaders should study, maybe learn from?
Role models of leadership that leaders should look at today.
You mentioned a number
sort of
from
the
Africa.
role models earlier, yes. I'm not sure I think often for me, I think everyone was sort of great at what they had achieved at that point. I think I would have to look at Kwame Nkrumah. I think he stood out at a time when it was quite difficult and showed an independence of mind that was crucial. And unfortunately, he wasn't well supported at that time for him to truly flourish. But that's the kind of leadership we need now, that really looks at the holistic best outcome for the communities that we serve, so that we can achieve and make sort of everyone's sort of life conditions better in what way we can. So I would have loved for him to have lived longer and for us to have seen a great deal more about what he did. But his story has definitely sort of inspired me about keeping your mind on the real objective, which is the betterment of our communities.
Now, Rapelang, how can people connect with you? Where should they follow you?
So I've got my website, rapelang.com. I'm on Twitter, at Rapelang Rabana. And I've also got a Facebook page, the Rapelang Rabana. Yes.
Now, thank you. Last but not least, is there one piece of advice you would really like to give to future leaders they should take to heart and maybe implement in their own leadership?
Some advice I could give to leaders. Maybe to leaders or to entrepreneurs or anyone sort of trying to make a difference, is that it often feels intimidating to start because the end outcome that you desire is so much bigger than where you're at today. But I've learned that there's no time where you feel sufficient. There's no time when you're smart enough. There's no time when you are well educated enough. There's no time when you know enough. There's no time when you know enough people. There's no time where you are ready. And you need to start with the comfort. You need to get comfortable with the uncertainty, and you need to start with exactly what you have, where you're at, with what little you can do. And that's how you start to make significant steps forward. There's the economic theory, chaos theory, which basically says that we overestimate what we can do in the short term and underestimate what happens in the long term, or what they call sensitive, I forgot it now, but essentially to me it speaks to the fact that executing on big ideas is not a linear process. So when someone hasn't started and they look at the end outcome, it can often look very intimidating to get there, because in your mind you're trying to make a linear process, whereas execution is actually quite dynamic, and it shifts around quite a lot. So there's no ways you would have made that end outcome in a linear mind. And if you're stuck at the beginning looking at the end outcome as a linear process, you'll never actually figure it out. So you've got to take steps, and every step you take gives you new information, new insights, and you respond to that. And that's why it's a dynamic process that you couldn't map out from the beginning, and it becomes impossible for you to see the end before you started.
So the time to start is now.
Always.
Well, Rapelang, thank you so much. You're an incredible inspiration. In fact, I would almost say you're the Elon Musk of Africa.
Oh, no.
You definitely...
Elon Musk has done a great deal. We have so much more to do.
Well, looking into the future,
Yes.
I think you showing us what is possible. really, you are building the future.
Thank you very much.
And you're doing it from a very positive, genuine point of view. So thank you so much,
It's
and
a
all the
pleasure.
best.
Thank you.